comes in the shadows. No one has to know. The truth is in the gallows. It'll burn but won't let go. A whisper in the darkness. In the quiet it'll grow. You try to hide it in the farthest place, but everybody knows. There's something in the shadows. It cuts you like an arrow, shifting through the dark. Your strength is in your weakness. There's fire in your blood, hanging from that hole, but everybody knows there's something in the shadows. There's something in the shadows. It finds you in a gold room, a silhouette against the wall, lit up by the white moon. Will I run, awaken dawn? You can see the faces, but you don't know their thoughts. You can feel the traces from the chalk lines on my heart. There's something in the shadows. It cuts you like an arrow, shifting through the dark. Your strength is in your weakness. There's fire in your blood, hanging from that hole, but everybody knows there's something in the shadows. There's something in the shadows. There's something in the shadows. Cuts you like an arrow, there's something in the shadows. Cuts you like an arrow, there's something in the shadows. Cuts you like an arrow,
Welcome to Mystic Moon Cafe Radio.
And you were listening to In the Shadows by Amy Strop. Anyway, good evening, everybody. I'm here. I'm Wendy. I'm your hostess, and I've got Miss Cindy in here as well as a guest host this evening. Ah, yes, there she is, even in chat. Hi, Cindy.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on tonight. You know how I am. I really like having a co-host. It's just, it makes me feel better.
No, I like the feeling here because I'm usually the head peanut in the peanut gallery.
Exactly, yeah. Well, how was your
Karen
day?
Today?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh. All right. I'm excited about our guest today. It looks like we have Karen Dahlman on.
Yes, I do. And golly, it's just such an honor that we have her on tonight. And
she's wonderful.
Yeah, she's been dealing with the Ouija Board for over 40 years, practitioner, talk show host, and she serves as the director for the Talking Board Historical Society. It's just fun. Karen, would you like to join us now, or do you want to wait?
I'd love to join you now.
Okay, fantastic. Yay.
Yay, thank you for having me on your show. I'm looking forward to this conversation we're going to have this evening.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be terrific fun. For those of you in the audience, Cindy is Kansas City Astrology and Tarot. And Karen and Cindy have been kind of talking back and forth about the signs and the stars and things, and I was sitting there going, I have no idea what they're saying exactly, but it's awesome.
And Karen nailed it pretty well. I mean, she knew that you weren't a typical Leo.
No, and it's if you understand, at least I understand a little bit. I know that Cindy is, is a practitioner, but I like to dabble in it. And I think when you have understanding of the signs and how they relate to people, especially we're talking about our rising and our moon sign, you can really learn a lot and know a lot about somebody. It kind of gives you an edge up in a way to understand, how that person might want to take in information or receive it. So it's that very valuable, I think.
Know thyself.
That's right.
Indeed. All right. So, Karen, we're here to talk about you and your book, The Spirits of Ouija. 40 years of talking to the spirits?
Well, actually, in July this year, it's 46 years for me. So that book came out almost 6 years ago. It'll be 6 years in November when that book, October, when it came out.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I've been doing it for quite a long time.
You had to have been so young when you started with it.
I started in utero. Just kidding. People like to make that joke. I started in 73 at the age of 8.
Okay.
So that's when this whole odyssey started, and it's just been a lifelong friend, I would say. And I say friend because all the different spirit beings I've met over the years through the board. And I've used it for writing my books, especially the first book and my third book. The second book was more of a recall of all my notes that I've kept over the years of when I work with the board and this tool. I keep copious notes since 86, but the first 13 years were more recall and also through my diaries. But I, use this tool in such a fashion to learn about stuff and also to use it to spark my creative imagination, as well as to bring forth inspiration and words in my book that I can share with people. So that's developed more recently in the last several years into my YouTube show, where I do weekly stuff related to the board and bring on guests that also work with the unseen dimensions. And then I talk a lot about how to navigate the unseen dimensions with the board or even off the board. So yeah, it's something that started for me in 73, and it's been something that's been with me all these years. And it's been an integral part of my life, quite frankly.
Fantastic. Obviously no fear then. I don't fear it like a lot of people do, but you started really young and didn't show the fear. I think that's fantastic because, with the Hollywood dramatizations and demonizations and, some religions trying to do the exact same thing. And I always thought, it's got to be mostly misunderstanding and not having all of the knowledge you need to approach these things. Keep an open mind.
Yeah, I so concur with what you said. And you got to think back at the era of 73, and it wasn't, of course, social media wasn't around. You were pretty much in a vacuum if you did these things, or your friends might know you used a Ouija board, or, I was very much interested in everything mystical. And I read a lot of every book that was in the library about, whether it was about UFOs, aliens, Sasquatch, witches, witchcraft, the Ouija board, spirit communication, any of those things, seeing ghosts. It was like I would check all those books out, every single library I went to when I was a child, and read them. And I wanted to really educate myself. And in those books, it wasn't that I came across anything so negative about the board. That came out a little later in some of the movies, and Hollywood did a great job with it. And there were some older books too that were written about it. But my experience at such a young age, it was like really from my family. I mean, Santa Claus gave it to me on Christmas Day, 1973. Mm-hmm. And interesting enough, the next day, December 26, 1973, the movie The Exorcist came out a day later. Yeah, but I didn't see that movie. My parents wouldn't let me see it. I didn't even it wasn't really on my radar at the time. I don't think I saw it till I was 18 or 20. I saw it when I was a lot older. I really didn't care about it. I thought it was kind of funny when I did see it, and I did enjoy the movie. So it's a scary movie. I still like to watch this day, but I kind of laugh at it. But I was given this board, and there was no sense of, oh, that's bad or evil or it's fearful. And in fact, I was raised Catholic, and I would go to church on Sunday, maybe use the Ouija board on Saturday, or use the Ouija board when I got home with my brother. It was, there was no weird connotation or stigma about it in my family. It was like, oh, okay, that's cool. It's a game. You can use it, whatever you want to do with it. I don't think they really understood. Although I told them, we're talking to this and talking to that, and this is what I've heard so far. They were kind of like, oh, sure, wink, wink. But I just, as a child, it's hard to get friends that will sit there seriously enough with this tool and long enough as it takes for the planchette to move. And so it was more intermittent and hit and miss. I had better luck with one of my brothers and a few of my friends along the years, but it really wasn't until going into college. High school, college is when I could really get it to work great with people, because at that point they were curious like I was to explore some of these things, and were not afraid of it. And that's really what it takes. It takes an open mind and not having a fear. It's what you fear is what you're going to draw to yourself. If you don't have that fear, it's really common sense for myself. And when I teach others how to use this tool, it's very common sense, and there's definitely a way to work through all that if people do have fears, but also to bring in just the positive side to this tool. There definitely is a positive side to it, and I know people talk about the negative side, and I've people told me stories, and I've seen or experienced from people their experiences they share with me of some of their more negative, not so good stuff. But for me, it's been nothing but positive, and that's, I know it's because of my approach to it at such a young age, and how there was no negativity around it when it was provided to me. And then throughout the years, all that other stuff was just nonsense that people threw their fears at me. I just saw it that way. I saw myself very separate from their fears, and it always has been very positive for that reason.
Fantastic. And well, it sounds like you didn't just do it as a party favor either. No. The slumber parties and the girls doing what was that? Stiff as a board, light as a feather.
Light as a feather, stiff as a board. And by the way, when friends would come over and say, my mom said I could spend the night with you at your house, but I can't do Ouija board. And I said, okay, we'll play light as a feather, stiff as a board instead. Yay! It was something mystical and metaphysical, right?
Right, exactly.
And Karen, you grew up in Wichita, Kansas, correct?
Well, my dad was in the Air Force, but I was born there, and I spent quite a few years there. And I returned there again when I was there when I was really young, and then I returned there again when I was a sophomore and part of my junior year in high school. So I really lived all over the place, but that's where I was born.
Oh, awesome.
Did you get to use your spirit board there, or?
Well, I did when I was older. I sure did. But when I got the board, I was living in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Ah.
And that was in 73. And then when we went back there, it was, 80, 81, I was there in Kansas again. And yes, I did use the board then. But when I started using the board, the first time I ever used it was in Albuquerque, New Mexico in 73.
It's a very majestic place, too. There's a lot of power lines there, or ley lines.
Oh, yes. And of course, they get the whole Roswell thing and Dulce and all that, all the UFO reports and stuff out there. And it's a very spiritual place. I was very fortunate when in graduate school to do one of my internships at the Yakima Indian Reservation. And I worked in the Native American Substance Abuse Treatment Program doing art therapy with some of the patients there. And I started making friends in their community, in their reservation. And I worked with several people that were part of the reservation also at another internship I did at the University of New Mexico Medical Center. And they invited me to some of their mystical ceremonies and feast. And that was really a wonderful opportunity to incorporate some of that work into my board work. I could see how what I was doing was evolving over the years into something more mystical, and it really followed a lot of some ancient traditions just unknowingly to me, but just through my stuff I was reading, I was beginning to incorporate this stuff into my work and also my views. And so I would have to say one of my favorite spiritual traditions is Native American spirituality, and probably because I was influenced so heavily by it when I lived in New Mexico.
So when you say that you were doing it unknowingly, was that, when you look back, do you think that could have been a spiritual memory from another lifetime or another dimension even?
Oh, I love that you asked that. So I love, that's a great question because yes, it is. And so when I was, when I was really young, I can remember back about the age of 2, I can have memories from there. And I remember there was this friend I had who nobody else could see in my family. And his name was Dacky. And he was this little guy. He could change sizes. He could be as small as like 10 inches, or he could be as tall as 2 or 3 feet. And I remember we just hang out and play together, and he'd tell me stuff, and I'd ask him questions. And my mom would always say, "Who are you talking to? Who are you talking?" I go, "Well, I'm talking to Dacky. Come here, see Dacky." And she never could see him. And she said, "That's an imaginary playmate." And I said, "Well, no, he's right here." And so I was already at that age seeing, experiencing things. I already had the ability to see, I guess I would say, see with my third eye, see with my heart instead of my real eyes. Mm-hmm. And I used to have beings also that would come into my room at night when I was sleeping, and there were some loving beings. They'd stand there, and I now call them the guardians, but you could call them the tall ones, but they're not extraterrestrial, but they are of an ethereal source. And the guides have explained to me a little bit more. I will talk about the guides in a second, who they are, but they would come and I would feel such an unconditional love from them. And it was just incredible things that I experienced as a child. I experienced many things like this throughout my life. And I think because of that, I wasn't afraid of those appearances and the interactions I had with the different beings, including Dacky, that it just was I felt very natural to have the Ouija board is in a sense like a lifeline, or I call it my cosmic phone into these realms. So when I was younger and when I went to school, let's say kindergarten, I remember my mom was saying, "You kind of need to put these away and maybe not be talking to people that other people can't see," right? So I did, and I really thought that I need to not talk about these things. And I went to school and didn't talk about them, except for, sometimes sleepovers, and I would have the Ouija board and say, we can do this and do that. I still didn't talk about Dacky, and I still didn't talk about the guardians, and I was still experiencing the guardians up to about the age of 12. Dacky was when I was still about the age of 5. But interesting enough, I'm going to jump way far ahead here. The last book I wrote, The Spirit of Alchemy, he came back, and he came to me in it was more thoughts through my mind, and I would go on these long walks, and I would hear him talk, and I would just repeat what he said into an audio recorder. And I didn't know at first, it was this poem. It was a download of this poem, and I go, "My God, Dacky's back." And then I was always go back to my guides, who are the beings that I've been speaking with through the board and also off the board since '94. And they said, "Yeah, Dacky, he never left. He kind of went, you kind of pushed him aside, but he stayed with you this whole time to reemerge when the time was right." And so all these beings, they're starting to come back now. They've been coming back for years since I've been more open to not hiding this stuff. But yeah, I would say this came from relationships I had with these beings from different incarnations and also in different dimensions. And through that, just the wisdom I gained, or the insights I gained in those incarnations, or if you wanted to even call them past lives or future lives, because it's all really happening now. That just comes through. It just comes through very natural for me when I use this tool. And so it's a combination of quite a few different things here, but yes, it is a kind of a bleed through and just a knowing that comes back to me when I use this tool.
Oh,
wow.
sure.
And this Daki it sounds like you described Daki as a male, or was it just a non-gender entity?
You know what? He would call himself probably non-gender, as that most of these beings do. Although we've stuck with the male part because it just felt like a little guy. He looked like a little guy, he generally looked like a little elf or a little sprite or an elemental. Wow. Really cute. And I can still see the outfit he wears and his shoes and his tights and it was blue and he was cool with the guy thing. But I would say all these beings are really androgynous. So we'll
That's
probably
so
be talking
neat.
about.
I'm jealous of that one.
You are?
Just a little bit, yeah.
Oh, did you guys not have some kind of playmate when you were little like that?
No, I didn't. Mine was more the animals around us. They were just my constant companions. So similar but different.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I don't think I had any playmate like that. I did talk to myself a lot, but there was it was honestly more. It felt like just talking to the things around me. It felt like they could have conversations with me.
That's very similar. And so I actually literally saw him and we would interact and play together. But I know what you're saying. A lot of children are like this, and it's usually before the age of 12, all up to 12, but it can even last longer. But children have these, and when they're not encouraged or supported, or even just said, hey, why don't you just draw a picture of your friend? It's like then we lock up these abilities. And it truly is abilities within ourselves to be able to access these other dimensions. And so most children have some kind of experience, but yet they quickly forget, they're not encouraged, like I said, or it's just, they learn quickly not to talk about it. But even with that being said, we all have the abilities to tap into these unseen dimensions and interact with them if we so choose. It's always free will. But a lot of people don't want to because it frightens them, or they think it's not good to do so, or they've been told that it's, wrong. For me, I was never told those things other than you probably shouldn't do this at school. Mm-hmm. So I just realized that I'm just not going to, I don't want anybody commenting on that. So I'm just going to do this on my own. And the Ouija board was one of my ways to continue doing this throughout my life, to a point where, as I came out in the public in 2012 with my first book and started talking about my experiences with the board and the different beings I've been working with, that's when throughout the years they've been around, but they all started pouring back in because it was now like I was accepting it myself, that this has been and will continue to be a part of my life.
Very nice.
That's awesome.
Yep. I've always felt that, my intuition is extremely strong. I just had to get myself to a point to listen to it better than maybe I did when I was little. But the deer in the headlights looks from the grandparents, or not really my mom so much, but, when I would just come up knowing things I had no idea, no way of knowing, and I get that, Wendy!
I love that. I love that you just felt free enough to say those things regardless. That's really wonderful. Oh, yeah. I mean, and now, like you said, it's really coming back to you. You're really practicing it?
Yes, yeah. For the last probably 20 years, actually.
Oh, love it.
Mm-hmm.
Wendy does a lot of paranormal research.
Yes. See, yes. And that having those abilities really help you in that realm of doing that type of work.
Mm-hmm. I think it saved my bacon a couple different times, but like on a job site, all of a sudden going, those people are not drilling where they're supposed to be drilling, and I shoved back. I'm still not sure that something there didn't pull me back. It was a 30-inch diameter, 8-inch thick concrete slab that came down into the spot I had been standing just a heartbeat before.
What?
What made me go, whoosh back like that. It wasn't even like I heard a noise above me and looked up. It was all of a sudden I was almost shoved back or pulled back. And that was,
wow.
If I hadn't listened or been open to whatever it was, golly, I would have been a pancake.
That's amazing. When was this?
Probably, I think about 98 or 99.
Wow, did that change things for you? For me, I'd go, okay, that wasn't just me. There's something greater here working with me.
No, because I always kind of thought so anyway.
Ah, okay.
It might have given me a question mark there going, was that them speaking to me and I did it, or did something pull me back? But otherwise, I didn't doubt that the message was, it had saved me, basically.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a great story. I mean, I think many people have those kinds of experiences, and I think more and more people are able to talk about it now, and they may not just brush it off as we probably would have back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. But
right.
People are starting to talk more about it. But yet, even if they don't talk about it, I think throughout our today, there's all kinds of messages and helpful energies always around us, and it's a matter how are we gonna open up to them? Are we gonna listen to them or hear them or experience them? But they're there. They're always there.
Indeed. Well, this was a place. It was the old Menorah Hospital in Kansas City. And I've been diabetic since I was 2, been on insulin since I was 2, and I was, I'd get the flu and end up in the hospital quite often as a child. But, I didn't think that much about it. But we were there doing this huge renovation when I was a pipe fitter, and I just thought the parallels were just they just made you go, that's really interesting, but I didn't really doubt. It was just there. It just was what it was.
I bet people were like, how the heck? What?
Yes. Yeah, pretty much.
They saw that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, didn't you notice the water? I said the water was coming down everywhere, There was an incident report because it was awfully close.
Dang.
Mm-hmm.
Karen, what do you think technology's role is, if any, in how people open up? And I'm not talking about the internet and the message boards and being able to here we are in all these different locations and we're able to talk as if we're in the same room. I don't necessarily mean that. I mean the ability to open people's minds. Do you think it plays a role at all?
I absolutely do. I mean, technology, like you just mentioned, we're able to be here. I think we're all in different states, right? We're all over the country doing this conversation. But I think it allows us, it brings us closer to people than we've probably ever been before in some ways. In other ways, it distances us too by being on your phone and just relying on that instead of interactions or making a phone call or person to person. But it also brings us together. We can start sharing more ideas and sharing our thoughts about such matters and subjects. And then you start to feel like you're not so isolated and alone with it or in a vacuum. And so you can have these great conversations or shows that explore this stuff and listen to it while you're, here we are in the United States and you're in Australia and listen to it later. I mean, even the technology of that is incredible. Or you can listen to it streaming in your phone, in your car, which I do. I stream some shows in my car when I'm driving and I get to hear the stuff. It's just amazing we can do that when that wasn't available before. And also, having access to information. So you want to understand something further, you want to know more about a topic such as some haunted location, and you can go online and read all about it. And then you can, if you find an author you like wrote about that or explored it, you might go get that book. You could have it instantaneously on your computer in front of you. I mean, I'm reading a lot of books now just on my computer and on my phone and on my pad. I download, the Kindle version. I know a lot of people do that too. And so it's having everything right there at your fingertips. And that, it just opens up the possibilities of exploring these things. And to people that are younger right now that have, let's say, in the last 20 years with all this technology, the internet, they were born this way. They probably know what the Dewey Decimal System is or how to use cards in a library, right? And that's cool. I don't care that they don't know that. I think we had to put all that extra energy into it.
Yes.
I wanted to go to the library. I had to walk, or I get my parents to drive me to the library, and then go through the Dewey Decimal System, and then see if I can get the book. And then it wasn't there, and I had to get it on loan from the library. And then I had to wait till it came in a week later. And then it was that whole process where it was like you really had to be devout to doing it and really wanting to do it, desiring it. Where here you just go, boop, pull up some information. Now, on the flip side, too, I think the information we share, you've got to weed through it. It's, not everything is what you think it is. And I think I see more and more of this it's on social media, but also just in electronic forms or things you might download. It's everybody's opinion. And you have to learn to still find your own opinion. I think when you're left alone, you tend to develop it, I think, even stronger because you're doing it for yourself and you're probably doing your own research. But when you are just around people all the time and electronically and these shows, it's like, it's cool to have all this information, but you still have to weed through it. And, one of the big questions that kind of tags along with what we're talking about right now, people ask me, well, how do you know that you're talking to a good spirit and not a bad spirit? It's no different than when you develop a relationship with somebody. You take your time and you see if that person is legitimate over a course of time, whatever that time might be, whether you can learn to trust them. And it's the same way it works when you're working with spirits or the Ouija board or something of that nature. But it also works that way when you're taking in information, such as the show tonight. You have to take it in and go, does this work with me, sit with me? Does it open my mind? Does it repress me? Does it make me feel better? Does it, and then you ask those questions of yourself, and then you can begin to figure out, the authenticity of the message for yourself or what's coming through all this new technology. We have to really, go through it lightly and look at it with a level head, which I don't know if we always do.
Yeah, sometimes as human beings we could be limited. Very
limited, yeah. What do you guys think about that? I mean, that's a great topic you brought up, Cindy. What are your thoughts on this? How the technology has affected us?
I think it helps us to explain things better as practitioners of the metaphysical or the occult or, the unseen, so to speak. I was explaining to somebody once about how it's possible for some of these otherworldly spirits to transfer their thoughts into your head, not exactly telepathy, but that they could get into your head and see what you're seeing, almost like a remote vacation. Mm-hmm. And that they could even transfer a little bit of their consciousness that way. And it really sounds off the wall. And the next day, and this is all part of synchronicity, which, I'm sure you know about if it's clearly obvious that you're in tune. But I saw a Chinese commercial of all things that was a young lady, her husband, doctor comes out of the surgery room and he's like, I'm sorry, but, we didn't, he didn't, his body didn't survive the surgery, but he's still alive. And they hand her husband to her in a cell phone.
Oh my gosh.
Essentially what they did is, they downloaded his consciousness and it was like a bunch of videos of him talking. You know what? You might have seen it in something like, I forgot the Keanu Reeves movie that came out where
Matrix?
His girlfriend's, John Wick, where his wife is on a cell phone and it almost seems like she's talking to him. But essentially, it seemed to make sense technologically that you could download someone's consciousness. And I mean, here we are, we're talking to Alexa, we're talking to Google, and they could have conversations back with us.
Right.
Yeah.
Imagine when it gets that much more intelligent. So in that way, sometimes I think that technology helps to help describe or open people's minds. But on the flip side, it's a lot easier sometimes to use the technology than to tap in for most people.
Yeah, that's very true.
I think it's kind of taking us away from. I think it has pros and cons personally. We're losing the personal touch. Going out, speaking to people face to face, not screen to screen, but actual face to face, and maybe shaking hands or hugging, or the greeting, the healing touch. You were raised Catholic, I was raised Catholic, so the peace be with you and all of that.
Right.
I just now having so much information and weeding through what is false and what is good, that takes a bit of talent, I think. But having the information, like, I would love to know if Patience Worth was an actual 17th century peasant woman in Middle England, but I couldn't find her. But I know that there's a possibility that I could find out, maybe. Unless and could tell me, but
no, they never could validate that from Pearl Currens. They never could validate that woman actually lived or was alive. So doesn't mean she didn't. It just that they never could validate it.
Right? Yeah. Well, that was the time, though. What, 1912,
Yeah, early 1900s. That's right.
Right. Yeah. And I would think that the poor, barely educated woman that was coming up with Middle English, there's just no way she could have picked that up somewhere.
Yeah, it was a dialect that was lost. There's no way she would. She had an 8th grade education.
Exactly.
Pearl did, and there's no way she could have just known that. It had to come from somewhere.
Yes, absolutely. That was profound for me. I went, "Oh, that's cool.
Isn't that so cool? That's a great story."
Absolutely is.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that story. There's also around that same time. There's some other famous people that were using the board like she was, and pretty profoundly. I mean, she wrote Pearl Currens through Patience Worth through Pearl Currens became a published author. And back then, getting published, you didn't self-publish. You were published by a publishing company or a house. Right. And she won awards and accolades for her writing. It was crazy.
Her ghostwriter.
Yeah, that's a true ghostwriter. Ta-da-ta. Now, around that same time, there's this woman. Have you heard about Betty White and Stuart White?
That sounds familiar, besides Betty White.
Yeah, not our modern day Betty White. This
right.
This was in the 1900s. Stuart White was a great adventurer and explorer, and he knew like Teddy Roosevelt, and he was a wonderful author. He wrote a lot of books on the Wild West and just this uncharted territory out here. They lived in California. Eventually, they ended up in Santa Barbara, and his wife. This is a really cool story. They were at a dinner party, and somebody pulled out a Ouija board and said, "Hey, let's do the Ouija board, yay!" after dinner. And so they started using it, and funny things. They're asking funny, silly stuff, and they said, "Betty, come over here and try it." She goes, "No, I don't want to." And then the planchette started spelling Betty, Betty, Betty. They said, "Hey, they want you to come over. Come on over." She was like, "I really don't want to," but she sat down at the planchette. It started working, and then they started getting a lot of messages. And then towards the end, whoever they were talking with said, "Go get a piece of paper and a pen," or I think it was pencil, whatever it was, a writing utensil. And she started taking and started writing, started getting messages that way. She was like pretty flabbergasted this even worked. So she went home and kept developing her skills on her own. And then after several months, it might have been about 6 months, I can't remember the exact time, she started getting the messages directly, as you were talking about earlier, Cindy, through her head, like telepathy. And so she would lay down and take what she would call nap, and she would check out of her body in a sense and allow these energies to come through and speak. And they would talk to Stuart, who would write everything down by hand, write everything down that she was dictating. And it was all about the other realms, like what it's like when you transition, when you die, and what happens in the different dimensions and all these things. And she called them the invisibles. And so if people are interested in this and they want to know more about it, you can there's a free download online. If you look up the Betty book and look up the Unobstructed Universe, and I think it's one of those or both of them are free online to read. But that's really a good read too, because she's bringing through such profound information, very much like the Seth material that came through back in the 60s and 70s. But this predates that, by like 40 years. But it was very similar kind of information. And that was around the same time that Pearl Currens was bringing in Patience Worth. But there's many stories like that where people have used this tool in enlightening ways like that.
Absolutely.
Now, oh, sorry, go ahead,
Andy. No, please go ahead.
Now, I know with the tarot practitioners, they talk about sometimes they have a deck and it feels charged, and they get another deck and they're like, it's not as charged. Is it like that for Ouija boards or spirit boards for you?
Not for me. People will say that for themselves. Everybody's a little different when it comes to this tool, as you probably learned because you do tarot as well, and I do too. And everybody feels different. And for me, with the deck, I'll go, oh, this is when it's really calling out to me today. And then so I feel what you're talking about. But for the board, no, I can take any board. I have my favorites, though. There's certain memories they hold, or how I got them, or a gift that was given to me, and so in that sense, they're charged because within me they bring up this wonderful feeling that I associate with them. But no, I don't get that. I can feel energies, but for my boards, I just really like them all. So they all kind of they adorn my house. They're on the walls. They're sitting out. There's a few still in boxes, only because I switch them out and I'll take some and travel with them when I take them to shows and stuff. But no, not for me so much, but people do talk about that for them. And I think everybody's going to come about this differently. It's how they work. For me, the board is nothing. It does nothing other than it becomes the permission slip, the reason why I'm activating my own the excuse or reason why I'm activating my own abilities within. I really think what I'm doing is channeling, and the board it serves as that reminder or that excuse to do that. And so when that's shifted for me over the years, when I saw that has nothing to do with the board. This was many, many years ago. I was using paper sacks and pizza boxes, and I'd write numbers and letters on them, and away I would go with a Pyrex dish upside down, or a double old-fashioned cup, or a shot glass, and I could make it work just the same. So it wasn't so much the board for me. So then I don't have that energetic thing. For me, it's more about the excitement of, I love these tools and using them, and that's more from within than from the board. But somebody else who works with us differently would probably tell you, oh, that board feels great. And I say, if that makes you feel great, then absolutely, that's the board to use. And it's about raising your own energy to a certain vibration to make these connections. At least that's how it works for me. And if that helps that person do that in a positive state, then they're going to have better responses. And that's the board that, resonates for them, that'll work the best for them too.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about people's...
Oh, go ahead, Cindy, please.
Go ahead, sorry. Well, you're talking about people's consciousness and how it resonates. And I did see that you were talking in your book, I think it was The Spirit of Alchemy, about living with your higher self versus your lower self.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So to answer the first question about the consciousness, yes, it's how you feel within yourself, which becomes the avenue to vibrating higher, and your consciousness also going to that level. So that part of you, that sentient part of you, can connect. So yes, so people might feel it through the boards. I feel it more through myself. And the board just becomes just that tool I use, which it has no special powers or energies to me at all. It's myself. So I can get in that space without the board now. And I do. And now what's happening for me in the last 5 or 6 years, I've been a little more open about it, is my direct channeling of the energies. So I have who I call the guides that come through and will directly work with me. So in the spirit of alchemy, Secret Teachings of the Sacred Reunion, that is all about how to connect to your higher self. And ultimately, once you can work with your higher self more, you can connect to the divine source of all that is. So I use the whole tradition of alchemy, and the more the Hermetic sciences, more the Hermetic tradition. I'm not looking so much as transforming gold or lead into gold, although I'm looking at more of the archetypal energies of that, as well as the concept of the lead within your life transforming itself into golden opportunities. And I go through a whole process, alchemical process of working with your inner stuff to do this. When I say inner stuff, the stuff you don't want to look at, the stuff that is great, the stuff that is bad, the stuff you shun, the skeletons in the closet. That book takes you on a journey really into the depths of yourself. And then through that process, and that's how connect with your higher self works. You must learn to work with that lower self, that ego self, and learn to be able to, as my guides call it, take the socket or the plug and plug it into the socket of the higher self. So it's kind of like having a appliance with its cord, electrical cord, and you plug it into the wall, and that allows you to charge up into the energy, which would be electricity in that case. But the whole idea is that if we can work through, not just transcend, but incorporate some of the lower stuff in our field of energy, the lower self, the ego, the things that make us shun or feel afraid or abandoned or fearful, and all those things. If we can learn to work with that, incorporate it, and that book talks about how to do that, it allows you to have this power, this energy, to then not be afraid to tap into this greater part of yourself. Now, when I talk about the higher self, what I'm referring to is that part of ourself, of our consciousness, that exists not just within our corporeal existence here, but beyond. That part of us that reaches back up into the ethers, way past the astral levels, but into the divine consciousness of all that is. It's that part that you can call it that golden thread. You can call it that umbilical cord that ties you back to source, whatever name you want to use for that. It might be God for some people. It might be the matrix. It might be, as I call it, source. The one, it ties you back to that. And that your higher self becomes the avenue to make that connection. And making that connection, and it's not something we could do all the time, because if we could do it all the time, we wouldn't be here in the third dimension. Mm-hmm. This is learning to access parts of ourselves that are so much more wiser than just what's in our body, just so much wiser than our own brain. It's wiser than our own, what we're taught to think and know, but it transcends that, where we can start bringing in information that's like epiphanies, it's eye-opening and it's insightful, and having more aha moments and synchronicity, and start to notice when synchronicity is happening, because you're tapped into that now. And so we vacillate between going in and out of that all the time. But if we can practice doing it more often than not, and remind ourselves when we move aside and we lose that connection, we can just plug right back in. And there's all kinds of steps to do that and processes to go about it. And many of the, I would say almost all, I'll just say it this way, many of the great ancient traditions and cultures, and I really enjoy studying different theosophies and philosophies from different ages, any culture. And I know a lot of the stuff the Native American tradition taught me a lot of this, but after that graduate school experience and even beyond, I just started reading and learning as much as I could about many different types of traditions around the world, and also different religions, and to understand what is it what's the common theme, what are they all trying to encapsulate and teach us, and be able to bring a lot of that information into that book, because I think we can reach it from all these different levels. Some people resonate more with the Egyptians, or some people might resonate more with the Chinese culture, or maybe with, like, as I mentioned, the alchemist. And so pulling all that in and talking about how this was done in ancient cultures, and how we can do that same stuff today, given what our circumstances are and how our lives are. And, we have this media, as we mentioned, or electronics, and our devices have changed, but yet the human spirit hasn't. And so if we can tap into some of these knowledge of those that walked before us and use that information, we find that we can do exactly what they were doing when they weren't afraid of many of these things. They lived in unison and with the cycles of life, and weren't they weren't disconnected from it. And so I'm saying stay where we are today in our life, but learn how to connect back into that. And so that's really a process of doing that. And it takes a lot of practice. But again, I just want to reiterate, it's not that we're supposed to live in the ethers and live in this higher self or these higher dimensions all the time. As my guides say often, they'll say, just remember you chose to come to where you are, and that's where the most growth will happen. And there are many that applaud you or behind you and have, your best interest at heart for you to make the best of this. So remember, be human first. But never forget that you are, out here, you are way beyond your body, your limited physical body.
That's fantastic.
That is interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It does sound like you, in a lot of ways, you are not only connecting with universal truth, but you're connecting with yourself throughout all of those incarnations.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes. When I was a therapist years ago, one of the things I used in my practice was past life regression. I was trained as a hypnotist and also as a past life regression therapist. And I used those techniques with many of my clients when it came the right time to, or if that was a part of the process for what they were working on, their issues. And we did a lot of past life regressions. And I myself went through many for over 2 years. And it was so much learning that happened. And I learned so much from my clients too about how we can progress forward and backwards and in between lives, all, within our minds, all within just that session. And that many times we have spontaneous recalls, as you were asking me earlier in the show, like, is this from past lives? And sometimes we don't know, we can't go, oh yeah, I had this memory, I was this person back then. It's more like, all of a sudden you're doing something, you go, wow, this feels familiar. And God, all of a sudden I understand this. It's like that knowing. But through the past life regressions, people were able to actually tap into it and go, yeah, this is what I look like. This is where I lived. This is the era. This is what happened to me. These are my teachings, my lessons. This is what I learned. This is how I died, and all that stuff. And then learn so much from that. Heal anything that's the residue, we'd call it, that was left over from that life that's carrying and lingering on into this incarnation, and then also be able to go forward in life. Not that that's something I would direct them to do. They just automatically start popping into future lives or in between lives. And so there's so much information that can be learned from that and downloaded and brought back into this incarnation to help us. Because it's really not about making things more complicated. It's really about learning to empower ourselves more. And so that's what I found would happen in these regressions or progressions. And the same with myself. There would be invaluable empowerment that came out of those sessions.
I'll bet so. And now, do you think any of that is a genetic memory, or is it somehow actually bridging the gap and seeing the past lives? Somehow.
Wendy, I think you bring up a really great question or a comment, because the verdict's not out. We don't know. We don't even understand why we dream. So we don't really know. And so I'm open to all possibilities of that. Sure. I'm open to that. It could be genetic. It could be remembering ancestral, memory. Mm-hmm. It could be your imagination. But I'll tell you what mattered to me as a therapist. What mattered to me were my clients getting better? Were they finding a way to relieve whatever it was, the issues they were working on, to find a way to make their life that much more healthier for them? Mm-hmm. And the answer was yes. And so that was what I was after. So I didn't worry so much about, okay, is this something they're just making up in their imagination? But heck, it's helping them. Or right. Is this genetic? So that's what I'm saying. I'm so open to all that. And I've studied where people say we're not really sure. And for me, I don't have the answer either. I think it's quite a bit more complicated than that. And what the guides always say is, right now you're living multidimensionally. You're living in many existences right now. In fact, all of them are happening right now. Now, how the heck do I wrap my mind around that? Because we have this thing in this existence that's a time-space continuum of point A, point B, and all the way down to Z. We have all these points along a line. We don't see it as circular and spirally, if that's a word, spirally. I consider it a spiral. So that's great. It's a great comment. It's a great thing to always consider. We just don't know. We just don't know.
Yeah, really don't. And yeah, I think a lot of that living in different planes all at the same time. I am not a quantum physicist yet. I may be my next life. Yeah.
Yet, I love that caveat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Sheldon sometimes, I'm not crazy. My mom had me tested.
I love his morphogenic field work. I think he talks about it in a very spiritual, metaphysical way that I can really relate to. So, sure. Quantum physics is, I'm just excited about that. And now I'm excited about the electric universe. It's a whole nother kind of theory of how things are working. We're all electromagnetic, which we know we are. So there's some really cool stuff. And in fact, I'm working on a book right now that gets into consciousness, and it does explore this idea beyond quantum, but looking at the electric universe and some of the theories behind that, and some of my experiences with what's going on with myself in some of these dimensions of being able to communicate with beings from many different dimensions and not just deceased. So it's the journey. The journey it's just infinite. The journey just continues on and on. Yes. And I find that the more it's going down the rabbit hole, right? The more we explore this stuff, the more there's just so much more to learn. And I'm just amazed that we just never get to the end of it. We never will. And that's the beauty of this thing. There's so much more to explore and discover. We're just the tip of the iceberg right here.
It would be horrible to get to the end of it.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Like, it'd be like, as a kid, it's Christmas and Christmas is over, and you're like, oh, I gotta wait another year for this stuff. It's time.
Right. I lost my train of thought. Total derailment, no survivor.
It's easy to do when we go down these rabbit holes because there's just so many
really is. Yes,
angles.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I am spiraling. I'm talking about so many different things kind of at one time, and that's really hard. I get it.
We do that here, though. That's where the conversation goes.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. Now, becoming disassociated, basically, through the church with the ancients, basically, the ancestors and ancients and things in the church telling us how bad that was because they weren't in the seat of power if the witches, the so-called witches, and the... Right, all of those people, do you think they were more enlightened than we might be even today, as far as spiritually speaking?
Well, it's always relative, and we judge something from our perspective because it's hard to say, but I will say this, they had some incredible... teachings that came out that have survived. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can look at the Bhagavad Gita, you can look at the Egyptian Book of the Dead, you can look at all these different great texts that have been around for thousands of years that have survived this, and they talk about the 12 commandments is what they talk about. Excuse me. They talk about the commandments. Basically, they're all saying the same thing: as above, so below. Do unto as you do to yourself. Treat others kindly. It's that same. It's the same concepts, and they're just being repeated in newer cultures. So I think there's something there. If it's going to, all this stuff's going to be repeated time and time again. These tenets of ways to behave in the world and how to interact with the divine. So I would say there's definitely something there, and they had. A direct relationship to it, more so. When I was researching the book, The Spirit of Alchemy, I do a lot on the history of the ancient cultures and how they responded to the world at large in terms of how they might have viewed their world because there was not the technology, our technology. They had different technology, and their different technology was focused more on communal living or, survival, of course, but also the seasons, the cycles, the stars, alignments. Mm-hmm. And there's something very powerful with that, the ley lines. And we're just now beginning to uncover these ley lines on Earth and saying, well, these great temples were built on all these ley lines. Well, imagine that. And there was a goddess temple here first, and they knocked it down and put this Roman, cathedral or something. It's that they knew that. We don't know that. We're just now learning that, given all the technology we think we have. Mm-hmm. So I think their technology was very advanced for their culture and societies that existed, where ours is very advanced on a different level, maybe more mentally, and we're bringing the spiritual part back in, where the spirituality was controlled, the narrative was controlled for quite a few thousand years here, where before I think it was a little different. It was different. It was smaller groups or tribes. And they had their own rhythm, and this rhythm over here was a little different, but they all found a rhythm that was very similar because they were practicing some of the same stuff. We can find that in the temples they built. We can find that in some of their sacred teachings. We can find that in stuff they left behind, the burial sites. So it's hard to say that they were more advanced, but if we're talking about spirituality, probably so, because again, their traditions have lasted. I mean, we're practicing yoga. Hey, that goes back thousands of years,
Right.
So or Qigong or even tarot reading is not as old, but that goes back to also the alchemist. And so there's stuff we brought forward, and those are things that last because there's meaning in them, and that meaning has something for our culture today too, and people are really wanting that. And we can see it, how it's coming to fruition again, and I would say being more made mainstream when we see all these ghost hunting shows on TV. I applaud that because that says people are more interested now in the mysterious. And of course it's encapsulated within what happens to you when you die. That's okay, because there's always this process that happens too in this ghost hunting or paranormal investigation that takes it to a mystical or spiritual level as well. And so it's us coming back in tune with, wow, our ancestors, those who were here before us, are still walking with us, quite possibly, and let us explore it. And so now we're seeing it on TV everywhere, and paranormal shows, and I'm speaking at different events on the paranormal, and it's fantastic because it's saying more people are really wanting this, and they're searching it out, and they know there's something more to it, and it's just us awakening. So I think that says a lot to our ancestors in the ancient cultures. They understood this.
Right. It's an awakening and a reawakening, kind of.
Yeah, isn't it? And remembering. It's a remembering. And that could be this ancestral thing awakening with us. It could be our genetic, our DNA. The guides like to call it our genetic source code, they call it. It's starting to awaken. All that stuff we call, junk DNA. It's just stuff we haven't awakened yet. And so it's great to, it's happening. It's happening. We're seeing it. We're in it. We're in the midst of this. And it's been happening for a long time. We're always awakening. But I think because, go back to the technology question and the comment, is that with the technology we have, life is a little simpler for us in some ways. It's harder too. We have to, especially with work, you're expected to do more and paid less, but because you have all this technology with you. But on other levels, it allows us more freedom to explore these things, where a lot of our ancestors were just trying to survive. And, you didn't live a long time. So now we have the time to live longer and the time to explore these things, and the time to really, take it in and see what it means to ourselves, and therefore have an opportunity to evolve. So we're sitting at a place where it's all kind of coming together, culminating in a point, and we're right there at that pinnacle, trying to understand what to do with it all and learning from it.
The learning from it, that's the biggest part.
Yeah, if we're willing to learn.
Keeping that open
Karen,
mind.
have you ever used your spirit board or tried connecting to the ethos or any kind of logos in a place like a labyrinth or a power zone?
I have. In fact, my board travels with me a lot. I'll take it different places. But let me think if I can think of an example for you, because I take them. I took it out to the desert not too long ago where
Do you have a portable version of your board? Like a
what I do is I usually take a smaller board with me. So the boards nowadays are they're pretty small compared to my big 22, 11-inch boards. A lot of them are really small now. Or I'll just make one myself and have it with me. I have another one that's a circular board given to me by one of my friends, Linda Deere, who creates small talking boards, and it's a circle one with a little circle planchette, and it's made out of a rubber plastic, so I can put it in my suitcase and it's not going to get broken or ripped, or it's very easy to travel with, and so I'll take that one a lot of times with me. But yes, I have, and this is the interesting thing. I love that we're talking about this, the sacred places, the ley lines, and the spiritual spots that everybody said, they have so much energy, because what I find with this is that, yes, it's great to go there and feel that energy, but the energies that are there, let's say it's some kind of spiritual group or it's some type of being that's there, they're non-local. Being non-local means that you can contact them no matter where they are. So you can still bring in that wisdom that might be there from whatever energies that are there. So that's one way I like to do it. Although I do like to go to these places. Now, one of the things I did more recently, I think it's about a year ago, but I'm always thinking about this topic right here, because I do like to travel and experience some of these power places. I will go and I will allow myself to be the walking Ouija board. Meaning, since I am doing direct channeling now and allowing the energies to come through telepathically, I will go to those spaces myself and allow the messages to flow through. And then when I come out of it, I just walked a labyrinth, as a matter of fact, in Sedona. Angel Valley, they have this beautiful labyrinth. It's a copy of the one in the cathedral in France. It's beautiful. And I walked that by myself. We all took turns, so we had a privacy in it, and it was a long walk. And it was an opportunity to bring in some energies and have a channeling from them and come out and be able to write that down later, which I did. So I tend to do those sacred places that way, although I'm not opposed, like I said, to bringing the board and doing it with somebody. Now, the thing about the board, I prefer to use it with a partner, and I prefer to do it with a specific partner I have right now, who's on all my shows. His name is Rodney. We have a great connection and really have been able to ground and bring in some high vibrational energies. They've always been with me, but they come through very clearly with this partner. I don't switch around partners very much, and even if I did, it would take quite a few sessions to get that energy to a level of or a caliber to be able to get solid information coming through that we have coming through right now. So I'm pretty careful about that. So, and I do the board by myself once in a while, but I find that my messages are a lot shorter. They're not as descriptive or verbose as I would get when I'm working with my partner. So there's a limitation there. So I've learned to use myself as the walk-in Ouija and bring in the messages for that reason.
Yeah, it's a lot like dowsing. Some people use their pendulums or their rods, and sometimes they just decide to use their own fingers instead.
Yeah, exactly. It's very similar to any kind of divination like that, where you're allowing the energies to affect you, and then therefore that you can, it's a message. Or with dowsing, they'll get like the water witching. You'll get the things moving, or the pendulum, you'll get some kind of directional answer. So it's very similar to that. But I'm getting words. I'm getting messages that are coming through, and then either I will record them as they're coming through, or I will sit and stop and write them down.
Yeah, I read in your book there that approximately 1890 is when Ouija Board was officially branded and sold widely as a toy, no less. But when did the concept actually come into being, do you think? Was it the ancient Romans, the ancient Chinese, Egyptians?
Well, there's a lot of stories out there that are not validated or definitely not researched out, where they're saying that the talking board originated in ancient Rome or Greece, or ancient China. And they're talking about this system of rods that would move and could spell, but that's not the same concept. The concept of a Ouija board is what it consists of is number one, a planchette, which is a little table that moves with your fingers on it, and then a board. And that's truly what a talking board consists of, not of some other kind of apparatus. Like, it'd be wrong for me to say the pendulum and the dowsing rods are Ouija boards. Yet they do, as we just mentioned, they do divination. So people will say that, and that's just not, it's unfounded. So at the Talking Board Historical Society, we really look at what history and facts we can dig up and find. And many of the members in this group have done some incredible research into the development when it first appeared. The Talking Board in the United States is where it first appeared, and the years it appeared, and how they know this, and the proof they have. And then also, everything we can tell you about the history of the Ouija board as well. So, and these people have dug up, we're talking like the founders, and for example, Robert Murch, our chairman of the board of this group, TBHS, he's actually met with all the family members of these people who founded the board, and it goes on and on. But anyway, so what happened was in 1886, there was a craze that hit Ohio. And the craze was this incredible new way, a board that you can get it to spell for you, and it talks, and you move this little table around on it, and it spells words. It just started going like wildfire. It actually went viral back then. Viral back then was if something got published in one of the major newspapers, like the Boston Globe, it would be all over. Whoever could get that paper, they'd read it, right? That was viral back then. So it went viral. And this is in 1886, and it started in Ohio. Well, in 1890, some businessmen and one businesswoman, they came together and they said, look, there's an opportunity here. And they weren't like considered to create this tool for the spiritualist community. They saw it as an opportunity to create a tool that, hey, people are starting to make these themselves. And so why don't we make one and let's get this marketed out there. And that's what they did. Right. But before that, we also know in 1886, the Walter S. Reed Toy Company had created a board called the Witch Board, like WITCH, Witch Board. And it did look like it was a normal talking board. So it had the numbers and letters on it, and it had a planchette that came with it, an indicator back then it was probably called. And we know that they created it because they they had an opportunity to do some good PR. And what they had was President Grover Cleveland was getting married to his young bride. And they thought, let's send him a board for his wedding. Sure enough, they sent it, and they sent a letter along with it, and they published it in the Boston Globe. So then again, it went viral. So everybody knew that there was this board out there. And so not only did that letter get published, but the fact that President Grover Cleveland responded and wrote a letter back thanking them for their ingenuity and this great device. But he said, however, I will not be consulted in for the state of the affair of the state in the future. But thank you anyway. And that we also know that letter, we have a copy of that. So that's in 1886. So again, 1890, they create this new tool. They sit down at a session, ask it what they should call this tool, and the board spells out Ouija, Ouija, and they said, what does that mean? They said it means good luck, and so the rest is history. They went and patented and trademarked this board in 1890. They were granted it in 1891, and it stuck as Ouija, the Ouija board.
That's absolutely crazy. Yeah.
And it just grew, and nobody could compete with that. When they saw how well Ouija was doing, there was just many factories that sprung up all over the area of Boston, all over Massachusetts, all over. Then it went up to Salem area, and then it was Chicago. But all these companies started popping up that were knockoffs, and they were all trying to create some type of talking board that could compete, and none of them could. The Ouija board was just the strongest one there, and it was marketed and trademarked as a game, as a toy. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's still sold that way. And so just out of respect to them, that's how they created it. And so all the other companies that have owned the trademark and patent, which Hasbro owns it now, it's still marketed as a toy for that reason. But that's how it originally sat, and it still is at the Trademark and Patent Office in the U.S. But nobody could compete with it. All these other knockoffs, just, they were made for so many years and they went away, basically. It's the one toy game, I call it a device or tool, that has really surpassed any other of this type, this nature, and is pretty much in everybody's psyche. It's in everybody's closet and attic, and it's been around for all these years, and it's still going really strongly, for that matter. It's a pretty incredible story of this one little device.
Very much so. I like that one that I looked up just looking around, seeing, and oh yeah, you can even order it online from Walmart and get a really pretty one.
I saw that one. That's the I think it's by Lisa Parker, isn't it? No, it's not by Lisa Parker. It's The Tree of Life. I forget who it's by. That's with the cat in it. I know that one. I didn't realize Walmart was selling that model.
I had no idea either, but I liked it. It spoke to me. The talking board spoke to me.
That's a really, by the way, that's a really powerful talking board, I think, in my mind. The ones that's done by that company, they do a Tree of Life, they do the Black Cat. There's a few they do that, and they're so Irish. They're so Scottish. They're Celtic. I mean, it's that kind of tradition they're built within.
That's what it looked like. The sun and the moon, I believe, and the tree, and it was just absolutely gorgeous and round. I love the round too.
Yeah, round's very unique. I do like the round too. I have that little round one I was telling you about, and then I have. That's not the only round one I have. I just have one round one right now.
Did you get any of those pink ones that they used to market in the early days?
I have the pink Ouija that came out in 2008. Was pulled down 5 years later. I have that model. It's actually one of my collector's items because I keep it in pristine shape. But I will use it every now and then. I just used it the other day in a video I made on my YouTube channel. People had reached out to me and said, "Hey, use that pink board again. We want us to use the pink board." And I said, "Sure." So I brought it out and used it. That's like the only 5 years it was made. People got upset about it.
I think, wasn't it made also in the early 70s at some point?
Not that model, not the pink one.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
that just had a very short life to it. People got really upset, and then at that time, Hasbro had it and they pulled it. Then what they replaced it with was the glow in the dark Ouija, which I have that one too.
Oh, that's funky.
It's a smaller Ouija. By the way, I like the glow in the dark Ouija. I like it for my traveling board. It's a very lightweight board. The planchette is just easy. It's just plastic, and you're not going to lose any parts to it. And it's just it's a great board. Also, it's fun because it glows in the dark.
Is it something to use in the dark?
You can. I mean, I tried everything as a child when I was younger using this board. I even older, sometimes I'll do it in the dark just because people will say, hey, does it work? And I go, of course it does. I typically, my partner and I, we typically sit in my living room, my dining room table. During the day, we don't get all weird. We don't, we might, once in a while, I light a candle because it's fun. We set the ambience. We have the lights on. I'm in dogs next door barking. My cats are running in and out. There's no big deal. I just think it's just very normal. It's just, it's like I'm getting out my phone when I have a text message with somebody. That's what this is like. Get out the Ouija board. We're going to do old-fashioned text messaging on the board.
Yes.
And by the way, the guides have a great sense of humor. They'll say, they have said LOL before, and they'll go, ha, 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 or they'll spell I go, you've been watching me text. And I go, well, we see what you guys are doing down there. We see how it works.
Are they good at spelling, or did they ever get things wrong?
Oh, no, it depends. Yes, they have. And so what I've learned about that, okay, so in my second book, the Spirits of Ouija, which we're mostly talking about tonight, I know we keep talking about Spirits of Alchemy. We're kind of going through them all, actually.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, good. Mm-hmm. So Spirits of Ouija, there was a lot of misspellings. And what I've learned over the years is it's not them misspelling. It's the energy coming through. And imagine this. Imagine that my partner and I are a channel, and we have a garden hose. And the garden hose is what the guides bring the energy through, or the energy that I talk to. And they come through a small little hose. It's a lot smaller spray that comes out. Yeah. Now imagine I have a hose the size of one on a fire truck.
Mm-hmm. Oh my!
And it's going to come through a lot better. And so what I've learned over the years is that working with different partners, it depends on where my partner and I are with our own energies merging together. Are we going to create a larger conduit for this, or is it smaller? And it's not a judgment of any nature. It's just saying that's what those two energies that work together are doing. And so when it
being in sync.
Yeah, it's not them misspelling. It's getting lost in translation when it comes through.
Ah, yes.
So now when they come through with Rodney, he's been a really excellent partner. Just honored to work with him because he is so good at using this tool with me. It's like a huge conduit, and they come through and there's hardly misspellings, and the words they bring through, I have to look up in the dictionary sometimes. I have a pretty good vocabulary, but no, not, I'm like, what? And it'll be like an old archaic English word. And I'm like, what? I wouldn't even talk that way. So it's really interesting, the stuff, how they come through. And we'll have a few misspellings, but that's typically, and we ask them to say that's because you guys would misspell it, or you've lost that in the translation that coming through. I said, okay, fair enough.
Mm-hmm. Changed over time, what have you.
That's true too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they like to spell fairies in the old way, like Faeries, I guess we would spell FAR. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Why? So they do the AE, the old way, and I was like, oh, I haven't seen that spelled in a long time. That's interesting.
Now, Seth Michael, a psychic medium out of, I think it's just north of Portland, Oregon, he has messaged me, and he wants to know if you've ever encountered spirits or guides that you weren't comfortable with.
Oh, okay. So, yes. All right. So when you, let me preface it this way. When you first start with this tool, it's super important to not trust the accuracy or think it's accurate of the messages coming through. It's like getting to know somebody in your life. You meet a new person, you go, oh, that might be a cool friend. You take your time to get to know them, and then you start seeing if they're honest. You trust them? Are they who they say they are? It's that kind of thing. So no, you can't always. And so when I was a lot younger at this, and not as understanding what I was doing, and I remember one time an energy came through. I was with my brother, and the energy came through and just was negative and just started cussing at me. And I was like, where did this come from? I haven't experienced this kind of thing before. And I think because in my own life, I just wouldn't put up with that. And it's something I always tell people. If somebody comes through and they're cussing or degrading you, berating you, saying negative things to you, this is not an energy you want to communicate. You need to shut it down. And they go, but they said this and they said this. I go, why are you communicating with it for like 15, 20 minutes? It had 5 minutes on the board with me, and I said, dude, you're done. You're out of here. Yeah. My brother looks at me and goes, what's this? I go, dude, I don't know, but we're getting rid of it. And I just said, bye. You cannot talk to me this way. It's really being strict about that. And if that energy came back through, I would have shut it down and not done the session. It didn't come back through. And I opened up the session again and started all over again. So it can happen. Also, messages can come through and you're like, like when you're brand new, it's when it starts to work for you, meaning the planchette starts moving and you're like, I know I'm not pushing this and I trust my partner's not pushing it, or you're using it by yourself, and you start getting some really cool messages like, this is who you were in a past life. And that's fun. But read that as a grain of salt. Read it as entertainment. They say, hey, you have treasure buried in your backyard. You just got to dig 10 feet down. Don't do it. You wait. Yeah, don't do it. You're going to hit a pot. You're going to hit, ruin your watering system or something else. People are like, well, they told me this. And I go, well, dude, you can't follow that. You've got to really, this is where people get into problems. This is where you have to be smart about it. I can't stress this enough. Write everything down. I take copious notes, and I also audio record it. And people go, that's a lot of work. And I go, you write with one hand and your other hand is on the planchette. It's not that hard. People watch my videos and you can see how I do it, and it goes pretty quickly. I would never take that information and go, this is what this means. Or they say something about a person and say, that person stole $10 from you, or that person's really not your friend. And when you first start, you're going to get all kinds of lower energies because you're not used to working with this, and you haven't built your energy up to know how to get beyond what I call the dead zone. That a lot of people don't know how to do that. It took me a while. Trust me, it took me a while to going through all this kind of stuff to learn all this. And so I'm trying to help people so they don't have to reinvent the wheel and start all over and not know what they're doing, but instead just to start with this process and to not take it seriously, use it as entertainment, put it away, write everything down. And then once somebody identifies themselves as like, oh, I'm your dead grandma, or I'm your spirit guide, again, take that as a grain of salt, write it down and see what happens. It was a process for me. And I'll tell you what really helped me to get beyond the dead zone is when I decided, and it was in 1989 through 93, so it was 4 years, that I had two friends. We'd use the board together, and we decided that we would communicate with our higher self. I said, why could we not talk to that part of ourself that's greater than self, so we talked about earlier, through a board? Why could I not talk to that part of me that's out there, that's bigger? It has wisdom, and this is when I first started working with the higher self and this concept. And sure enough, that's what we channeled through. And we just wrote everything down. It was entertainment, but it would say things like, have you thought about this for business? And maybe, trust yourself more here, or learn to do this so much, and try to be more patient, or just different things. This is all I wrote about, a lot of it in the Spirit of Ouija, because I thought that would help a lot of people to understand.
Right.
If you go there first and try to connect with that part of yourself and just endeavor to do that, you're going to make that connection with this greater part of you that's a higher vibratory energy, which will allow you to skip right on through or move on through nicely and easily through all this lower astral level stuff. And when you get to that level, what I found out, this is what happened to us, as we started talking to the higher self, the next thing we know, the angels started coming through. And then extraterrestrials that were benevolent started coming through. And then at that point, then the guides started coming through. And then finally in 1994, who I keep talking about tonight as the guides, they entered into the board and have been working with me since 1994. And again, here we are, 25 years later. They've been so consistent, nothing but uplifting, nothing but loving, unconditionally loving, inspirational, words of wisdom that help me and others in their life. And I didn't come out in the public and even talk about their work. And even though I wrote a book way back in 1997, I didn't talk about them helping with that book. I didn't talk about them in the public till 2012. It took that many years for me to go, I vetted them out all these years. Although it was very good all those years in between, but I had to do that process myself, because for me to come forward and share my experience, it had to be, I stand behind this experience, and I stand behind what I'm learning through the guides. And again, that was a process. So I love that Seth asked this question, because it does take time, and you can get energies that will, say whatever. And the other piece of this process too is our own personal agenda, our own personal beliefs, our own personal core of who we are, the energies we harbor, the way we think, the way we see life, do we see ourselves as empowered in our life? Do we see ourselves as a pawn to others? It's all those things, all that comes into play to what and how you're going to work with this board, and what kind of energies are going to come through. A lot of it will be a projection of our own energies. It will attract other energies of that same level. So we have to really, I always say, check yourself. Check your baggage, because we all have, and before we do this tool, and then work from a place of love when you use this tool. If you want to have good experiences, that's all I'm about teaching. And then everything shifts for you, and then you can start reaching into like getting your spirit guides coming through, and the angels and these other beings that are here to really help you. And they have many different names. You can call them the archangels. You can call them benevolent ETs. It doesn't matter. They say you call us whatever you want to call us. We're all the same energy, and we're just at a different vibration than you. We're all at different vibrations, and you're going to reach that which you truly want to resonate with. And so just really work with yourself first, and then everything follows suit after that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and I know Seth is all about working for higher vibrations and continuing the goodness. Now, he's also asking, how do you shut down a session?
Great. So what I do, I always teach people to say, get to a habit of just ending it by saying goodbye. You don't have, now the planchette doesn't have to go to goodbye, but if you think about, I make this very practical. You think about this, Seth, in your own life when you're talking to somebody on the phone, you're done, you're going to say, hey, goodbye, talk to you later, right?
Right.
And tonight, we're all three talking here. We're going to say goodnight, afterwards, share a few little words, and that'll be it. So there's a way, that's telling the person that you respect their time with you, and then, you're going to leave, and you're going to end it. Same thing here. I treat all the energies with respect, because that's all that I get coming through these days. Mm-hmm. And I also I want them to know when I'm done. And so I'll say, hey, how I end it is this. We just have our fingers on the planchette. We make it, again, very simple, very, very tangible. We just say, hey, goodbye. Thank you all so much for being here. We appreciate your interactions, your messages, your words of wisdom, and we look forward to the next time together. Thank you so much. Goodbye. And the energy just lifts and leaves, and I can feel it myself. My partner doesn't feel it. I literally feel it lift and leave, and then that's it. And I got to tell you, my planchette, I think ever since I've been using it, maybe when I was a child, I kind of remember it going to goodbye. The planchettes never go to goodbye for me. They just always just stop in the middle of the board. And when I say I'm done and, goodbye, then that's when they leave. That's as simple. But yeah, they're gone. Mm-hmm. And so, but some people go, well, I don't know, I'm worried. I go, then if you're worried, create a ritual for yourself that makes sense. As anything we do, we all have our rituals for ending something and starting something. Whatever it is, it could be just going to work, working in your cubicle, and then how you close your day and go home. It's like that. So I say, create something that makes sense to you. If it means that you need to blow out the candle when you're done, you want to sage, or you want to put your board back in a box, or you put your planchette away, or any of that becomes your ritual. And the ritual must have meaning for you. So I would say, create your own ritual. My rituals may not work for somebody else because they have different beliefs than me. My belief is when I'm done, they leave. Simple as that.
That's excellent and very strong-minded, very positive. So that's what you're going to experience, I'm sure. Yeah.
Every time, and any board I get on, doesn't matter what the symbols are on the board. People said, well, you've got a board if it has a what do they say, a star on it upside down, that's there's no way. And I'm like, really? I go, because my guides come through. They don't care about the board. They care about me, my connection. Right. They care about the vibration that we hold. And that allows them to come through. And they don't even care about the board. And I say, what board do you like? They go, we like the board that you call home. And I go, and right now I call my larger Parker Brothers board home. No, actually it's a William Fuld board. And my little Parker Brothers from 73 is my other home, because I really love that board. Because it's the first board that got me started on this Odyssey. So they like any board that I like, because that's where my energy is the best, so they can come through.
It's just like identifying or being drawn to a certain set of tarot cards or anything like that. Yeah, it speaks to you. You get your system down. Your ceremony, if you will. Yeah. Whatever you want to call it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I understand that.
I think ceremony is a beautiful way of saying it. Ceremony is beautiful because you whatever works for you now. So I tell people, what are you doing now? What kind of spiritual work? Well, I love to do tarot. I go, well, what do you do when you start your tarot session? Well, I get centered and I get in a sacred place and I say a prayer and I open this. I go, didn't do that. Bring that to this session.
Yep.
Yeah, because it's already working for you. And if you don't have one, watch some of my videos. I give all kinds of ideas, or better yet, just do a lot of research and figure out what works for you. I mean, some people like to bring in the prayers from their Christian faith or Judaism, whatever their faith is. Some people like to bring in stuff from other theosophies or practices. Wiccan, I've seen people do some of that. Again, I like to bring in Native American spirituality. I bring in, I say a prayer like I might when I was a Catholic. I mean, I do quite a few things. I bring in what works for me. And then I bring in breath work because I love breath work. I love working with that energy through my body, which comes from yoga, and I bring that into it. And, it's just bring in what works, and that's going to make this tool be that much better for the user.
Absolutely.
Karen, is there anything like a Ouija fatigue or spirit board fatigue?
I love that. Yes. People write to me all the time and say, gosh, I've been using the board and it makes me really tired. And my partner, Rodney, he started about 5 or 6 years ago with me. He also would get tired and just like, I can't do it for so long. And might have been a half an hour, 45 minutes, where now we can go up to 5 hours or longer. And he used to get headaches, and people would write to me and say, I get headaches, I get tired, I go, then stop, but the deal is this is what the guys explained to me. And this is only one explanation. Could be a multitude of explanations, but this is what I've received, is that when we start doing this work and we're working with a certain vibration of our own, and we're trying to reach other higher vibrations, there's a lot of cleansing we do within our own system. And so it's almost like we've got our own little toxins or blockages, and those are being released. And as they start to release, we feel that release, and it takes us to a new level where it's like, oh, I haven't been here before. Okay, I got a little bit of a headache. Oh, I've kind of awakened this part of myself. It's like practicing using a new muscle. And it'll hurt for a while at first as you're learning a new sport. And then after you get used to it, it doesn't hurt anymore. And that's where Rodney is now. And that's where a lot of people that write to me, they eventually get to if they stay with it. But that's a very common comment or question.
Well, does the board ever get fatigued, or what communicates through the board ever get fatigued either?
They can. It depends who you're talking to. So if you're talking to this deceased, yes, I've had times when they said this is probably all for us right now, especially when they're new on their side trying to work with this tool with us. I find that it doesn't happen when I talk to the angels, when I talk to the animals, when I talk to the guides, the higher throw beings. They don't get tired. They stop when we stop, when we're ready to stop, because they have no sense of time. They can continue on. When I say animals, I'm talking about animal consciousness or animals that are deceased. They seem to talk all the time. The animals that are alive, which we talk to a lot, also they will tend to say, hey, I just want to go eat right now or sleep, and they might be done.
Yeah.
Their conversations are a little less
simple.
It's simple. It's like a 2-year-old. I'm just gonna
show you a bowl of food.
Maybe when you're done.
Yeah. I knew somebody that used to use his own spirit board, and he described it when he was using it as riding the spirit.
Oh, yeah. Writing? Like WRITING?
No, like riding on the back of a spirit.
Oh, interesting. I haven't heard that technique. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't heard that before, but I can imagine that.
Yeah, it was, he had a spirit board that was made out of, it was like a cross section of a tree. And it actually broke on him, at one point. So he soaked it in water. And I asked him what he was doing, and he said, I'm healing it. And when he traveled back home, he took the board with him, and they buried it. And he came back with a new board, a new cross-section from the tree. And he was saying now, you see how connected that is?
I do, and I'll tell you what, that's actually beautiful because he's actually working with, we all work with, mine right now are compressed particle boards or cardboard, so there's an aspect of that, and I have some that are real wood, which trees. That's really interesting you bring that up because he probably was working with the life energy force of that tree, and one of the things that we do communicate with on the board is also trees. And trees are definitely old sentient beings, and they know all the history of their ancestors because they're in that ground wherever the seedlings were or are, and that the roots reach way down, and they have this whole interconnective like web, if you would, worldwide web, but it's underground through their root system. And we have these incredible conversations with the trees. And to me, when they come through, they sound very much like native cultures. Very beautiful, very poetic, and very direct. And so I'm not surprised what he said. He saw his board more as alive because of the tree energy of the tree. And he was responding to that probably. Yeah,
and he actually came from like an anime culture in West Africa.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
See, that's the beauty of this. We pull in what's in us, how we see life, how we were raised, our cultures. That's really important. See, we're all going to come and use this board a little differently based on that. And that's what's so wonderful about this tool. There's not one way of using it. And it's great to hear. I never heard that before, right? But I can respect where he's coming from because I totally get it. And if I didn't get it, I still think it's cool that he sees it that way. And that's the beauty of doing this work with this tool.
Absolutely. The diversification is just phenomenal.
It is. And what you can communicate with is also diverse, and it's infinite. Infinite level of possibilities of communication. And that's what this fourth book I'm writing about is about, is exploring consciousness on that level. Yeah, it's just amazing what you can do. Truly, it is my cosmic phone. I consider it like a cosmic wireless phone. It allows me to tap into any energies I want to just dial my frequency to that energy to match it. And then, boom, they come through.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it really is. It's just picking up the phone and dialing the right number. It's as simple as that. People go, no. I go, well, no, but this is my experience. This is what I've been doing for all these years, and this is where I am with it now. And so I just I keep pushing the boundaries of consciousness with this tool, and then also with myself as the tool, because I really think the board's not doing anything. The board again serves as this reminder, as this conduit, as this vessel for me to really do what is really my own abilities within, that we all have. We all just access different ways. Yeah. So people go, we got to burn the board, we got to throw it away. And I'm thinking, no, you don't. If you got any problems look at yourself. The problems are, you got to look at yourself. What's bringing that energy to you? What are you doing within yourself? Let's look at that.
Right.
And then you can approach it differently, and something new will emerge from this communication.
Have you ever gotten messages of tough love from your guides, and how have you handled that?
Yes, I have. I've had messages come through that have told me, hey, you're kind of out of line with this in a nicer way. But when I hear it, I'm like, what? They just called me out. And they said, well, we do it from a place of love. And it's nothing mean. It's like, have you thought about maybe shifting and changing this and thinking about this? And they always say positively, although you're a very determined person, your lack of patience is probably not suiting you right now with this situation. Or something like that, okay?
Right.
And they called out Rodney before, and he just laughs. And it really bothered me. And I sat there and thought about it for several days. And then I tapped into them and just did some automatic writing with them. And then I said, Rodney, come on over. I got to do a session. I go, I'm really bothered by what they said. I go, they're right. They called me out, and I've got to explore this further. And it was great because I'm not afraid to look at myself like that. And I would do that anyway. And so they totally did that. And I was like, but it really bothered me. And I was like upset about it. And we got back on, and they said, we didn't mean to upset you, other than you have been asking for this information in different ways. And so they just said some more things, and I was like, oh, now you put it in better perspective. Now I get it. And they go, yeah, you need to sit with it for a while, and that's what you did. But it's never from a place like a parent. It's not parental. It's really from like they're cheerleaders, like they're so supportive and loving. And no matter what choices I made, they're going to go with me even into my darkest moments. They're with me, and they're with everybody. Our guides are with us even in the darkest moments, and they're not there to change us. But they're there to help inspire us so we can do it ourselves. The guides said, we're not here to prepare the path for you, but we are here to help you prepare the path for yourself. So they really teach a sense of self-responsibility and empowerment, and they're going to bring through different ways of saying it. And usually I call them lesson plans when they come in, and ways of saying it till we get it. And it was 3 years ago, I think, or maybe it was 4 years ago. It's quite a few years ago. The guide said to me one year, I said, okay, I'm doing my New Year's resolutions. This is what I'm going to do. And we're just talking, and we get on the board. And I said, great resolutions. They said, we have a resolution. We're going to make sure that anything we bring forth to you, whether it's on the board or to your mind, that there is complete clarity. And we will continue communicating until we realize that clarity's been received by you. And if there's no clarity, we'll keep talking until we get that. That's our resolution. I'm like, hey, that's a good resolution. So that whole year, they made every effort to say, are you clear? And they said, well, your vibration's not showing that you're clear. And then I said, explain it a different way. And they explained this concept a different way. And then I'd say, okay. And they go, yes, now your vibration shows that you've got it. And then it was like that kind of thing. We have these kind of interactions where it's always supporting us to really become clear in ourselves and what we're trying to do in our own lives. But not because of what they tell us, but because of how they support us to find that ourselves.
That's pretty cool.
It's very cool. In fact,
Yes.
I have a session with Rodney what's today, 2 days from today. We're going to sit down and have one of our power sessions. We probably get together probably twice a month now, and that's about most we're doing the board now because of his traveling schedule and mine as well. And also I'm doing a lot of work off the board. So, but we'll be getting together for that, and I'm really looking forward to it because it's such a tangible way. Because I love talking to spirit guides. We all love talking to our guides, right?
Right.
But this takes it to a whole nother level. It's tangible. I can feel the movement of the planchette, and we have this back and forth conversation that's literal in front of me. You know, spelling out the words. I'm writing it, and we can dialogue. And it's like having a witness there with you, as Rodney and I are witnesses for each other through this process. And it's really I love it. It's really exciting and entertaining. And beyond that, it's just so inspiring.
Have you ever gotten messages in foreign languages?
I have. They came through once. I was talking to a deceased person who came through in Mexico, of course, speaking Spanish. Mm-hmm. And I know a little Spanish, but I had to look a little bit of it up. And I said, we're going to have to do a translation here. And so what happens is when they do come in different languages, they could come in just to introduce themselves. One came in with Roman. I was speaking Roman numerals for a year, and I was like, "What is this LMCX11?" And he goes, "Oh my God, that's a date." And then I said, "Okay, I'm not going to be able to do this whole, I don't know what language you're speaking, archaic, Hebrew or what Roman or what would it be, Latin, I guess. I'm not going to know this." So what happens is, and even with the animals, so the animals don't speak English, of course, or human languages. What they do is you have a translator, and the translator comes through, and typically for the animals, it's an energy that comes through. It's like an oversoul consciousness of animals that will translate. And when it comes through from people that are deceased or something, it'll usually be my angel. It'll come through. But yes, they might come through and say a few things in a different language, but then immediately it's not going to work unless we get the translation. And so the guides have stepped in before. I've done that, and then the angel stepped in, and so is this oversoul consciousness of animals has come through and been able to interpret whatever language is being spoken, so I can understand it. Now, people have written to me and tell me they've had Latin, they've had some archaic, and they don't even know code. They've had code. Some people get code. I'm like, what is this? So I've heard the gamut, and that's people have different experiences with it. Mm-hmm. It just really depends on, I think, the energies you're working with and what your ability is to, relate on that level.
So through your talking board, Historical Society, do you ever get people that have like a Ouija board in like Russian letters or Arabic letters or?
Absolutely, yes. People, yes, there are boards out there that are made, they're mass produced, that have Spanish on them, that have Canadian, well, it'd be French. They also have boards that people make. I've seen a Russian board. There's boards from all over that have different languages. I've seen Celtic design, which Celtic letters. Whatever works for people. I know a gentleman, and people can see this board if you'd like. It's on my website at KarenADahlman.com under galleries, under people with their boards. One gentleman made this board, and it's incredible. It has symbols on it. It's all symbolism that he received from an extraterrestrial, and he has this conversation with this extraterrestrial through these symbols, and he can interpret what it means. It's pretty phenomenal, and he has a few pictures of his board on there. Never seen a board quite like that before in my life. So
pretty far out.
It's really far out. I love it. Yeah, and this guy's a very talented musician too. He's pretty cool. That's what they gave him, these letters, to put it on a board, and that's how it works for him. For me, I just always came into with the English boards, our alphabet, and that's always worked for me. So, but if somebody else knows a different language, they can make their own board with their own symbols on it, their own alphabet, and it would totally work. Yeah, people make them in other countries. So, and I've seen some of these. I'll see them online. They'll send us pictures of them at the Talking Board Historical Society. They'll send them to me. So I've seen what these boards look like, and they use them.
That's fantastic.
I've heard stories about, like for instance, in the music industry, they say that in the past when they used to mass produce cassette tapes, they'd have the master copy. And sometimes some bands, or I don't know, the artists or whatever, were known to bring in their guides or whatever it was that they would use in their inspiration as they were recording or stamping out that master copy. And then from that master, you could make a whole bunch of other copies, and that essentially would have, you know, for lack of a better description, almost like a DNA imprint of that master that they make. Is it the same for a Ouija, do you know? A Ouija board?
Well,
when they make these mass-produced copies?
Yeah, that's how it works. I mean, I should say, a member of the Talking Board Historical Society has the original template that would be laid down and spray painted to put the letters on the board. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
And that's how they mass produced it. They would just take a template, spray paint, and then varnish it. And that's how they mass produced, is by hand. And so they have that template to this day. There's a couple of them out there. But in terms of the tape, are you talking about more like something's encoded because the guides were coming through, you're saying, for these people, and so they have that other energy in there?
Yes.
Yeah, it's not so much like that with the boards. The mass-produced boards, there's nobody there, praying over them, or, a warlock, or, you know what I mean? Or a magician,
yeah.
Right. And there never was for the Ouija board. But however, having said that, people make their own boards, and they put sigils on them, or ciphers, or symbols, and they put protection. They project all this energy and thought to them, because that, for them, that's what works in their system. And they want to send those boards to the people if they made them for somebody, because they want them to have that energy that they gave them. And so absolutely people do that. It's more on the ones that people are making themselves. So, if I have a lot of friends, as you can imagine, that make their own boards. Mm-hmm. And I've had a lot of people send me boards that they've made for me as well. And they do put symbols on them, and they say prayers over them, and they put a prayer in the back. And it's just a beautiful, for me, it's like I get to share a part of their energy that comes along with it, because it's a reminder of them for me. But yeah, so there's definitely an element of that. People like to bring magic into this work, as they do with a lot of the work they do with any kind of divination tool, really.
Mm-hmm. Right, and imbue the tool with it. That's
yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I know myself, I get a new board. I like to do rituals too. I really enjoy it. So I it's not so much that I think I have to do it. It's because I just enjoy. I like the idea of making this sacred for me. So I like to make my space sacred when I do use the Ouija board, meaning there's not a whole lot of distractions. I mean, we're focused. We've done a breathing exercise. We do this connectivity exercise. We say a prayer. And one of the things I like to do when I get a new board is sage them. So I'll sage them, and sometimes I sage myself often, actually, after I do something, or I feel like I was around some negative energy, or I felt negative myself. It's those kinds of things that people bring into their sessions. It's the element, again, of magic or shifting the energy vibration, and really all that does help, because it helps ourselves and our own energy. And if we believe that helps us, that's even a more win, bang for your buck. I believe that my energy can be broken up, any negative energy, with the sage. That works for me. And so I will do that a lot with my boards and myself. But would I tell anybody to do that? I would say no. I'd say find what you believe in, what you believe works for you. Because ultimately, the goal for me, the goal for myself, is to be my own protection. Meaning the way my constitution of myself. And so I work towards that by all these other different rituals I do. And so when I come to the board, I am that protection because of what I believe.
Sure.
And the energy I hold. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I knew a woman that had her own spirit board. She made it herself. And she always got very clear messages from it. And that wasn't the first one she made. But that was the one she used for like the last 10 or 12 years. And one day she decided to go and use a previous board that she forgot why she stopped using it. But as soon as she started using it, she felt very sad and very depressed.
Mm.
And she remembers, it brought up a memory that when she made that board, even though she made it with love and best intentions, she said it was during a time where her husband had just left her. He got up and walked away, literally said he was going out for the paper, never came back. And she was pregnant. And wow. She said it was a very, very sad time in her life. And, she said she was very scared, and, she loved her baby, even though, it was, how you love your baby before your baby is born.
Sure.
And but still, that whole, that trauma of the sadness and the abandonment and how am I going to take care of my baby? She felt that all transferred into the board, and that's, she didn't realize it at the time, but she outgrew that energy, and switched to a different board, made a different board, not realizing it until all those years later when she looked back and tried it. I mean, when she tried it and she remembered all those, what was going on in her life. And have you seen things like that with boards, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I definitely believe in psychometry, which is pretty much what you're talking about. The energy, holds on to something, and especially, and I believe in our own projections too, of things that serve as a reminder. I can go through my jewelry box and look at some jewelry. I got that from that dude, or I got that from that guy, or this came from my parents' family, and then I get sentimental about it or emotional. I go, oh, a beautiful time. It's that kind of thing too. So it's a little bit of everything. And I do, and again, psychometry to me is a real thing. I took psychometry work years ago. I studied it for a while, and we would practice reading, objects. And it's kind of like using a board. Is it the board doing the work, or is it the object doing the work? I really think it's ourselves, but it becomes a transitional item to help us activate these sources within ourselves. So I think the board, in that sense, was like psychometry. The item was imbued with stuff because she saw it that way, felt that way about it, and a reminder of all these things. And that doesn't take anything away from her. It's the fact that, she probably outgrew that energy of that board and who she was when she used to use that board. But it's people often tell me this a lot, that they feel like there's energy in these objects, and I would agree on some level. And I will also say most of the energy is within myself and how I feel about that object, which then creates an energy field around me and the object when I use it. So I don't know if the chicken or the egg came first kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that's a beautiful story. I mean, people tell me that all the time.
Well, you joked that you started in utero.
Oh, let me tell you who told me that once. I said, George Norrie, I was on his show, and he said, how long have you been doing this board? I said, back then it was like 40, 42 years. And he goes, no way, you had been in utero. I go, that's a compliment. I'll take that. Let's just say I was in utero then.
When you use the alchemical symbols, do you actually use symbols with it? I mean, or are you looking at symbolism instead? With the board? Yes. Or, with a spirit board just using, just using the alchemical methods.
Yeah. So for example, the sun and moon are the traditional, everybody knows about on the Ouija board. It didn't start as a sun and moon, by the way. It was a full moon, and it was a crescent moon. Then it became a sun and a moon. That happened in 1944, I think it was. And it just kind of progressed from there. But just those actually right there are alchemical symbols. The sun and the moon are used predominantly in the practice of alchemy as representing the red king and the white queen, and some of the processes you have to go through in alchemy before you can transmute some of the lower level energies or metals, base metals, into higher vibratory, such as gold. So therefore, those symbols on the board are typically represented as alchemy, but people can look at them and say, oh, no, that means something else to me. So somebody wrote me, and I wrote an article about this recently. Somebody wrote me and said, I was told that if the planchette moves to the moon, that it was negative. It was bad. So somebody out there in their belief system sees the moon as dark and night and negative, where they might see the sun as positive and, daytime and whatever. And so I said to her, what does it mean to you? That's what's important. What it means to me is the balance of male and female energy. The sun and moon represent masculine and feminine energy in some traditions. So there are all kinds of symbols on these boards, and people put them on there. I have a board a woman made for me. She put a seagull on there. She put some energy of some types of angels and beings, because that was her tradition. Mm-hmm. And I like that, because she's sharing her tradition with me, and I'm definitely into symbols. Now, if I make a board myself just out of paper, do I put symbols on it? No, I usually just put an alphabet, some numbers, and yes and no, because everything can be spelled from there. But symbols symbols are very powerful, because they stir and awaken your imagination. to project onto whatever it is you feel about that symbol. So people get, like I said, freaked out about some of the symbols on the board. Maybe the lady down the corner with the hands that are, you don't know what's going on. One hand's touching a planchette, the other hand's above. There's disembodied head floating around. I mean, people could get freaked out on that. For me, whenever the planchette went down there, out of repetition, that's where my angel enters the board. And for me, before I called them the guides, I knew them as the sun and moon, because when they entered, they had no name. They're androgynous also, no gender, but there was definitely two strong energies that entered, and one came in through the sun and one came in through the moon. So I called them the sun and moon. And later, it was definitely a balance of masculine and feminine energy. I've always worked with those energies in my life, even as a therapist. And then they became just a guide, because now they're like just a collective group of many different beings that are part of it. And they've never been born in a human body. But so the symbolism on the board is going to shift for people over time as they learn more about symbolism and what it means to them. Mm-hmm. So I always tell people, just don't get caught up in the images on the board, or even images on some of these other boards you might see. Like I have a board with a pentagram on it, which I love. It was made by my good friend Rick Schreck, who's the VP of the TBHS committee group, and that's what he likes to draw. And to me, it feels empowering, because it represents him and his artwork. And to me, it doesn't represent anything negative, because I just see it as a star, right. Or sign of Venus or something. It doesn't have to be Lucifer or the devil. Everybody projects their own stuff on there. So I just ask people to really pay attention if you're following somebody's own projection, including my own, and instead have your own relationship with any symbols that you put on the board or that are already on the board. And how you do that is you start doing research. And I've done many years of research looking into, again, what these different symbols mean in different cultures. And I love some of the stories, and I go, hey, I like the way that resonates. That resonates really is true for me. And that becomes, my own projection of what that symbol means. So yeah, the symbols can help you imbue power within yourself, or they can be disempowering if you start listening to other people and the negativity they say about these symbols. Because everything you find something negative for, you can also always find the opposite side, the positivity. We live in a dualistic culture society, and that's how the symbols are going to be viewed as well. So I say, look for what it is that you want to find or relate to in that symbol, and then let that be what it is for you. I hate dream books, because dream books tell you, oh, the apple means this, the forbidden fruit. I'm like, no, dude, apples is what I like to eat. That doesn't mean forbidden fruit. So it means apple a day keeps the doctor away. It means health, So find your own definition or interpretation of what that symbol means for you. And that's what's going to be important in the long run when you use this tool.
That makes sense.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, last week's guest had told me that they had recently been the recipient of somebody's big collection of Ouija boards, and they had made their own. Whoever they had gotten it from had made their own table. They had burned in the Ouija board the thingy stencil. There we go. And possibly even put blood in it. Now, the last part about the blood was harder for me to take, but
right.
Oh my gosh, I want to see pictures of this. But they're out there by you, though. You should look them up. Jay and Marie Yates.
Oh, they have the museum.
I think they might. They're definitely putting on a con. They're at Vulture City.
Ventura?
Vulture City. I don't know.
I don't know where that is. Okay, I'll look that up.
I don't either. Yeah, it's a long way.
They said they had like a museum of Ouija boards. I thought.
Okay, then I know there's one in kind of in the LA area. I've heard of the Ouija board. There's a museum up there. I've been meaning to get up there, and that might be these people you're talking about. So I'll definitely look it up.
There you go. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know what? People do all kinds of things again when they create their boards, and whatever floats their boat is what I say. Okay. Do you need to do those things? No. Again, you can just take a piece of paper, write letters on it. You don't even need numbers or yes and no or goodbye, because you can spell out all the numbers with your letters. You just need some kind of alphabet, some way to, or symbols like my friend in New Zealand does. You just need something so you can, correspond. You can communicate. Right. And whatever else you add to it to me, is like bells and whistles and the icing on the top of the cake. That's it. Maybe a cherry on top. That's really all it is. But then again, those things mean something to the person who creates them because it reflects their beliefs. And beliefs are major in doing this work. They really affect your work. Probably the most out of anything we've talked about tonight is somebody's belief about it. So some people maybe believe they have to have blood on there, or they have to have the symbol on there, and that's cool. If I say do what works for you, as long as I'm not here to judge how people want to use a board, but if they want to learn how to use it in a positive way and get such great insight in the stuff I'm talking about tonight, then I suggest, use things that, again, if I could reiterate, what allows you to get in that space of higher vibration and positivity, whatever that is, and then reach out and make those connections, and you'll be met with this very similar type of energy.
I agree with that message entirely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good hygienic mind space and spirituality.
Yeah, true. It really is. That's a great way of putting it.
Well, how would folks get a hold of you if they were looking for more information or to talk to you or anything? Yeah,
thank you. Thank you so much for asking.
Sure.
You can find me at my website, KarenADahlman.com, all over the internet, social media under Karen A. Dahlman. Don't forget the A. I do go by my middle initial.
Right.
Also on YouTube, Karen A. Dahlman. We have, I think, over 200 videos there. I have a playlist called The Women of Ouija, where Marla Martinson and myself did this for years. We do kind of a slapstick fun thing, but it's definitely serious about the Ouija board. We just have a good time with it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then one with Rodney I'm doing is called Creative Visions TV Beyond the Board. A lot of really cool interviews, and we do a lot of board sessions there. And I really try to answer all the comments so we can help everybody have a good experience. Join me there. Join me my website. Join my newsletter. The newsletter comes out every 4 to 6 weeks. I don't give out anybody's email address. It's just about informing what's going on. The latest article I've written or blog, or where I have my sessions where people can ask their questions of the guides, or where I'm speaking next, or whatever. So please, join me there too. But it's been an absolute pleasure being with you two ladies on the show. Thank you so much for hosting me, having me here. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for being on. Yeah, it's a great show, and that's what I'm getting through 3 or 4 different chat windows on Facebook. So
fantastic! That's great. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I hope people visit your website, especially to look at the galleries that you were talking about with people and their different boards, because it might speak with them. It might just resonate with them.
Exactly. People have boards that they bought that are mass produced, and they have the own they made. It's really inspiring to me too. And then there's also some pictures of different events, and I try to make it interactive. And I have a plethora of articles, blogs that I write about how to use the board. I talk about spirit, I do channeled messages there, all kinds of things. I just put up an article just the other day, I think last weekend or something. But join me there. You can ask questions, and I will answer your questions there. It might become the next blog I write. But yeah, I'd be happy to have anybody join me there. And also, my books are all available on Amazon.com. I do sell autographed copies on my website, but Amazon.com, they're there in Kindle and paperback.
Right, and available on the Kindle Unlimited as well.
That's right. So if you belong to that, you can read stuff for free.
Yes. Or the low price of $9.99.99 a month.
Well, that's true. There's that too, you guys. But you might as well, if you're a big reader, you might as well get in there and then down and get it. And I love it. I just want to get the word out that there can be a positive aspect to using this tool. And that really, it's not so much about the tool. It's really about developing yourself to be the most empowered person you can be and your greatest self in the world right now as we live in this incarnation. And that's really the bottom line message is.
I love that message. That's just perfect.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Excellent.
Well, I guess we're at the end of our 2 hours. It sure flew by.
Oh, wow.
I know, right?
Wow. That always happens.
Yep, it does. Yes, the best guests go the fastest, it seems like. I know June's going to be kicking herself that she missed this interview, but she's on her way to, Preston Castle in Ione, California. Ooh. Yes, they're having a Paracon this weekend there, and she and her buddies are setting up a booth, and we may even get some live feeds on our probably Facebook page. So keep an eye out, and we'll make announcements as we go. But and then next week's Wednesday's guest is Nick Redfern. He'll be coming on talking about his newest book and places of power that he's visited and where he likes, and which ironically is kind of Stonehenge with all the ley lines running through it. That's one of his favorites, apparently. And let me see. Oh, this Sunday I'm having a special show, and Roman Delgado will be back on the shaman brujeria, and there's another one that means healer, and I just can't pronounce it. I don't know what it is, but we're going to talk about Santa Muerte, Saint Death, Lady Death, and it's pop culture and growing in the Hispanic Catholicism communities. And I just think that's going to be a great talk as well. Roman is great. Just a lot of fun, extremely knowledgeable, just a real good show. But anyway, that's about all I've got, guys. Thank you so much, Karen, for being with us. I can't thank you enough.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you again, and thank you everybody out there for listening to the show as well. Thank you.
And I'll have it up on YouTube as well shortly. Just give me a little time. It takes everything time to sync and set up and all of that. But I will post the links in the Facebook event and private message me if you want it there too. So anyway, I think I'll take us out with Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, Save My Soul. And we will see you all Sunday, I hope. All right.
Bye-bye.
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 Streets of New Orleans with a girl of my dreams. I've seen a dozen brass bands play and swing while little children laugh, dance and sing. I've seen old men drunk singing the blues with top hats and canes and spectators' shoes. I consider myself lucky to have fallen in love with the girl, the city, and the river of mud. Let me know where I can go to save my soul. Let me know where I can go to save my soul. Where I can go to save my soul. I had a drink with old Louis' ghost. He was the most gracious host. I've heard Gabriel singing and playing his horn, and lived to see the day both my babies were born. I love jelly, Fats, Fess, and King. They were the ones that taught the world to swing. I consider myself lucky to have fallen in love with the music, the city, and the river of mud. Let me know where the sea and the river of mud. Let me know, let me know where I can go to save my soul. Let me know, let me know where I can go to save my soul. Let me know, let me know where I can go to save my soul. Where I can go to save my soul. New Orleans, New Orleans, is where I can go to save my soul. New Orleans, New Orleans, is where I can go to save my soul. Where I can go to save my soul.
And that's all, folks.